The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between three bright stars. Ships of every shape and size moved around it like busy insects around a hive. Some ships looked like living creatures with smooth curves and flowing lines. Others appeared to be made of pure crystal that bent light into rainbow patterns. A few seemed to fade in and out of reality itself, as if they existed in multiple dimensions at once. Captain Jake Morrison watched all of this through the small window of his ship's bridge. His weathered hands gripped the metal railing as he studied the alien vessels with quiet interest. Behind him, the bridge crew worked at their stations, checking readings and making final preparations for docking. "Captain, we're receiving docking instructions from Nexus Prime Control," said Lieutenant Ben Carter from his position at the communications console. His young face showed a mix of excitement and nervousness. Jake nodded and moved to his command chair. The seat was old and comfortable, worn smooth by years of use. Everything on the bridge had that same well-used appearance. The metal walls showed scratches and repair marks. The control panels were clean but clearly ancient by galactic standards. Thick cables ran along the ceiling instead of the sleek wireless systems used by newer ships. "Put them through, Ben," Jake said. A voice filled with clicks and buzzes came through the speakers. The universal translator worked hard to make sense of the alien language. "Human vessel Endurance, you are assigned to Docking Bay 779 in the industrial section. Please maintain minimum speed and follow the marked approach vector." Commander Lisa Harper looked up from her datapad. She was a tall woman with graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform was neat but practical, without any of the fancy decorations that some species seem to love. "Docking Bay 779? That's where they put the cargo ships and mining vessels." Jake shrugged. "Can't say I'm surprised. Look at us compared to them." Through the window they could see a Zephyrian crystal ship gliding toward the premium docking areas. The ship looked like a living diamond throwing off sparks of colored light as it moved. Its surface was perfectly smooth, without a single visible seam or marking. "Their ship is beautiful," said Ensign Mary Collins from the navigation station. She was new to the crew and still impressed by everything she saw. "Beautiful doesn't win fights," Jake replied quietly. He had been captain of the Endurance for 15 years, but the ship itself was much older than that. Much older than anyone on Nexus Prime might guess. As they approached their assigned docking bay, other ships moved past them. A Vorthan bioship pulsed with organic lights along its living hull. Tentacle-like appendages grew from its surface as they watched, forming new weapon pods or sensor arrays. The ship's surface looked like wet skin, constantly shifting and changing. An Alderani vessel drifted by in complete silence. It appeared to be made of some kind of metal that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. No engines were visible, yet it moved with perfect control. Jake had heard that Alderani ships were controlled by the thoughts of their crews, but he had never seen proof of this. "Beginning docking approach," announced Ensign Collins. Her hands moved over the old-fashioned control sticks and mechanical switches. The Endurance responded slowly but smoothly to her commands. As they drew closer to the docking bay, Jake could see alien crew members working on the station's exterior. Some wore environment suits that looked like works of art. Others didn't seem to need protection from space at all. A few appeared to be floating freely without any visible means of propulsion. "Look at that," Ben said, pointing out the window. A group of aliens had gathered near the docking bay entrance. They were clearly watching the human ship approach. Jake could see them gesturing at the Endurance. Some were pointing at the thick armor plating that covered most of the ship's hull. Others seemed to be focused on the large chemical rocket engines at the stern. He caught glimpses of what looked like laughter or amusement among several species. "They think we're primitive," Lisa said. She didn't sound angry, just tired. "Same reaction everywhere we go." The Endurance settled into the docking bay with a solid thunk that echoed through the hull. Mechanical clamps engaged with loud clanging sounds. The alien observers seemed to find this particularly amusing. Jake could see them mimicking the crude mechanical sounds. "Docking complete, Captain," Mary reported. "All systems show green." "Good work, Mary. Ben, open a channel to Nexus Prime Control." The same clicking voice came through the speakers again. "Human vessel Endurance, you are cleared for extended stay. Station security will escort your diplomatic party to the conference center in 2 hours. Please ensure your party carries appropriate identification." "Understood, Nexus Prime. Thank you for your hospitality." Jake stood and stretched. Through the thick metal walls he could hear the sounds of the station, Humming machinery, alien voices speaking in dozens of languages, and the constant background noise of a busy spaceport. Well, Lisa, ready to go make some friends? Lisa gathered her data pads and official documents. As ready as I can be. Think they'll listen to us? They'll listen, Jake said. Whether they'll take us seriously is another question. Ben turned from his station. Captain, I'm picking up chatter on the alien communication frequencies. They're talking about us. And they're calling us the metal ship people and the chemical burners. One of them said we looked like we escaped from a museum. Jake smiled slightly. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Let them talk, Ben. Words are cheap. Lisa headed for the exit. I'll go get cleaned up for the diplomatic reception. Try not to start any wars while I'm gone. No promises, Jake replied. After Lisa left, Jake walked to the main viewing window. The docking bay was bustling with activity. Alien workers moved cargo containers with devices that made the containers float in the air. Maintenance crews worked on ships using tools that seemed to reshape metal with just a touch. Everything looked so advanced, so far beyond what humanity could achieve. But Jake had been in space for a long time. He had learned that appearances could be deceiving. Mary approached him hesitantly. Captain, do you think we really belong here? I mean, look at what they can do compared to us. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Mary, how old do you think this ship is? I don't know, sir. Maybe 50 years? Older than that. Much older. And it's still flying, still fighting, still doing its job. How many of those pretty ships out there can say the same? Mary looked confused, but she nodded and returned to her station. Jake remained at the window watching the alien ships come and go. Soon they would all learn something about humanity, something about the value of things that lasted. The Grand Alliance conference hall was enormous. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into shadow. Hundreds of different alien species filled the curved rows of seats that surrounded a central speaking platform. The air hummed with dozens of languages being translated in real time. Lisa Harper sat in the section marked for new applicants. The human delegation was small compared to most others. Just herself, Captain Morrison, and two junior diplomats named Paul Grant and Susan Lee. They looked tiny in the vast space filled with aliens of every imaginable shape and size. 3 rows ahead, the Zephyrian delegation occupied seats made of the same crystal material as their ships. High Chancellor Vex stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body appearing to be carved from living diamond. When he moved, light scattered through him in beautiful patterns. To the left, the Vorthan Empire's representatives sat on what looked like living furniture. Their seats pulsed and shifted to match their movements. Admiral Knox was the largest among them, his biomechanical body a blend of organic tissue and metallic implants that seemed to grow and change as he breathed. The Alderani section was eerily quiet. Their representatives appeared almost human, but their eyes held a depth that suggested vast intelligence. They communicated without speaking, occasionally nodding to each other in perfect synchronization. The session will now come to order, announced the station's central computer in a voice that somehow reached every being in the hall despite the enormous size of the space. High Chancellor Vex glided to the central platform. His crystal body caught the light from above and threw rainbows across the walls. When he spoke, his voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Fellow members of the Grand Alliance, we gather today to consider new applications for membership in our coalition of advanced civilizations. Each applicant has been evaluated based on their technological achievements, military capabilities, and potential contributions to our shared goals. He gestured toward different sections of the hall as he spoke. We welcome the plasma weavers of the Andorian cluster, whose mastery of stellar manipulation will benefit all. We embrace the quantum dancers from the spiral arm, whose reality-shaping abilities open new possibilities for exploration. Lisa felt her stomach tighten as Vex's attention turned toward the human section. We also have received an application from a species that calls itself humanity. A ripple of sound moved through the hall. Some species made clicking noises that the translators rendered as laughter. Others produced harmonics that seemed to express amusement. Vex continued, his tone becoming more formal. The humans arrive in ships constructed primarily of metal alloys. Their fastest vessels require decades to travel between neighboring star systems. Their weapons technology appears to be based on projectile acceleration rather than energy manipulation. The laughter grew louder. Lisa could see aliens turning to look at the human delegation with expressions that clearly showed their amusement. Their computers appear to function on binary logic systems that our own species abandoned millennia ago. Their power sources are fusion-based rather than utilizing zero-point energy or dimensional taps. Admiral Knox rose from his living chair. When he spoke, his voice carried the sound of machinery mixed with organic undertones. Honored Chancellor, perhaps these humans would be better served as a protectorate species. The Vorthan Empire has successfully guided 17 primitive civilizations to higher technological levels. We could provide them with proper starship designs and weapon systems in exchange for access to their raw materials and labor. More sounds of agreement echoed through the hall. Lisa could see heads nodding and alien gestures that probably meant the same thing. A new voice joined the discussion. Senator Kayla of the Hegemony State stood on 4 legs, her insect-like body gleaming under the lights. The Hegemony concurs with Admiral Knox. These humans clearly lack the technological base necessary for Alliance membership. However, they may serve useful roles as a client species. Jake Morrison leaned over to whisper in Lisa's ear, "Want me to say something?" Lisa shook her head slightly. She had been through this before on other worlds and other councils. She stood slowly, waiting for the laughter to die down. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic systems. "Humanity appreciates the concern shown by the Alliance for our technological development." Chancellor Vex's crystalline form tilted slightly, as if he was surprised that she was speaking at all. Lisa continued, "However, we must respectfully decline any offers of protectorate status. Humanity has always preferred to stand on its own achievements, regardless of how those achievements might appear to others." The hall fell quiet. Lisa could feel hundreds of alien eyes focusing on her. "We understand that our technology may seem primitive by Alliance standards. Our ships are indeed made of metal. Our engines do burn chemical fuel. Our weapons do fire solid projectiles." She paused, looking around the vast hall. "But these technologies have served us well. They have carried us across the galaxy. They have protected us from threats that would destroy worlds. They have lasted through trials that have tested them in ways that newer technologies have never experienced." Senator Kayla's mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as dismissive laughter. "Lasted? Child, some of the species in this hall have been exploring space since before your son was born. Your entire civilization is barely a few thousand years old." Lisa smiled. It was a small smile, but somehow it seemed to carry weight in the enormous hall. "Senator, you're absolutely right. Humanity is young compared to most species here, but our ships are technology. Our methods have been tested in ways that you might not expect." She looked directly at Chancellor Vex. "We didn't come here to be pitied or to ask for help. We came here to offer our assistance to the Alliance. But if the Alliance prefers to judge capabilities based on appearances rather than results, then perhaps we have misjudged what this organization represents." The hall erupted in various forms of alien protest and outrage. Lisa could hear the translators working overtime to convert dozens of expressions of indignation and disbelief. Admiral Knox's biomechanical body shifted and reconfigured as he stood again. "The human speaks boldly for a representative of such a backward species. What possible assistance could you offer to civilizations that have mastered technologies you cannot even comprehend?" Jake Morrison stood beside Lisa. His voice was calm and steady. "Admiral, in our experience, the fanciest tools don't always get the job done. Sometimes what matters isn't how advanced something looks, but how well it works when everything goes wrong." Chancellor Vex raised one crystalline arm, and the hall grew quiet again. "The human delegation speaks with surprising confidence, given their obvious technological limitations. Perhaps they would benefit from observing Alliance operations before making such bold claims." Lisa nodded. "We would welcome the opportunity to observe, and we invite any Alliance members to observe our operations as well." The laughter returned, but now it had a different quality, less amused, more disbelieving. Paul Grant, one of the junior diplomats, whispered urgently to Lisa, "Commander, are you sure about this?" "If they see our capabilities up close," Lisa whispered back. "Paul, they're going to see our capabilities whether we invite them or not. Better to control when and how." Chancellor Vex's form shimmered as he considered. "Very well. The human delegation may remain at Nexus Prime as observers. Perhaps witnessing Alliance operations will help them understand the level of advancement required for membership." As the session moved on to other business, Lisa sat back in her chair. Around them, Alien delegates continued to whisper and gesture in their direction. The sounds of amusement had not completely faded. Jake leaned over again. "Think we made our point?" "We made a point," Lisa replied quietly. "Whether it was the right one remains to be seen." Susan Lee, the other junior diplomat, looked worried. "Commander, what if something happens? What if there's a crisis while we're here?" Lisa looked out at the hundreds of advanced alien species surrounding them. Ships that could bend reality. Weapons that could reshape matter. Technologies beyond human understanding. "Susan," she said softly, "if something happens, it might be their first real chance to see what humanity can do." 3 days had passed since the diplomatic reception. Lisa Harper spent most of her time in meetings with minor Alliance officials who seemed more interested in studying humans like museum specimens than in serious diplomatic discussion. The questions were always the same. How did humans manage space travel with such primitive technology? Why hadn't they developed energy weapons? Were they aware of how far behind they were compared to civilized species? Jake Morrison kept the Endurance ready for departure, though he wasn't sure when or if they would be leaving. The Alliance seemed content to let humanity remain as observers indefinitely. The alien crews working around their docking bay had grown used to seeing the humans, though the pointing and whispered comments never completely stopped. On the third morning, everything changed. The alarm that echoed through Nexus Prime was unlike anything the humans had heard before. It started as a low harmonic that seemed to vibrate through the station's walls, then built to a piercing wail that made everyone stop what they were doing. Ben Carter looked up from his monitoring station on the Endurance bridge. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Whatever's out there, it's big." Jake moved to the main display screen. The tactical readout showed dozens of contacts approaching from deep space. They were still too far away for detailed scans, but the computer estimated their size as enormous. "Get me Commander Harper," Jake ordered. Lisa's voice came through the communication system a moment later. She sounded slightly out of breath. "Jake, are you seeing this? The entire station is going into emergency alert. What are you hearing from the Alliance Command?" "Not much yet. They've called an emergency session, but the aliens I've been working with look genuinely frightened. I've never seen them like this before." The main display updated with new information. The approaching fleet consisted of 37 vessels, each one the size of a small moon. They were moving slowly but steadily toward Nexus Prime. Mary Collins called out from the navigation station, "Captain, Alliance ships are beginning to move. Looks like they're forming defensive positions." Through the docking bay windows, they could see the beautiful alien vessels that had seemed so impressive just days before. The Zephyrian crystal ships were accelerating away from the station, their faceted hulls flashing as they prepared for combat. The Vorthan bioships were already growing new weapon pods and armor plating, their living surfaces rippling with rapid changes. Jake watched a squadron of Alderani vessels phase in and out of visibility as they moved to intercept the incoming threat. Their reality-bending technology was impressive, but he noticed they were keeping their distance from the approaching fleet. "Ben, patch me into the Alliance command frequency." The communication channel crackled with dozens of alien languages all talking at once. The universal translator struggled to keep up with the rapid exchanges. Gradually, Chancellor Vex's crystal-clear voice rose above the others. "All Alliance vessels, maintain defensive perimeter at maximum engagement range. Do not close with the enemy fleet until we have confirmed their capabilities. Repeat, do not engage at close range." Admiral Knox's biomechanical voice responded, "Chancellor, Vorthan bioships are adapting weapons specifically designed for this threat type. We recommend immediate aggressive action before they can fully deploy." "Negative, Admiral. Intelligence reports suggest these are Devourer-class vessels. Standard combat doctrine requires extreme caution." Lisa's voice came through Jake's private communication channel. "Jake, did you hear that?" "Devourers. The Alliance briefing materials mentioned them, but only in historical contexts. I thought they were extinct." Jake studied the tactical display. The approaching ships were getting close enough for detailed scans now. What he saw made him understand the Alliance's caution. The vessels appeared to be constructed from some kind of black material that absorbed sensor readings. Their surfaces showed no lights, no energy signatures, nothing that suggested living crews. They moved with the steady, inevitable progress of machines that had been programmed for a single purpose. "Captain," Mary called out, Alliance Command is issuing evacuation orders for non-essential personnel. Are we included in that? They've designated all observer species as non-essential. We're supposed to prepare for immediate departure. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was young, but they had trained for situations like this. They knew their jobs. More importantly, they knew their ship. Ben, what's our status? All systems operational, Captain. Engines are ready for immediate departure if needed. Mary, can you plot an evacuation course? Already done, sir. But Captain, if we leave now, we'll be running away from our first real chance to show what we can do. Jake smiled slightly. Mary was learning. The Alliance command channel erupted with new chatter. The Devourer fleet had begun active scanning of Nexus Prime. Energy beams swept across the station's shields, probing for weaknesses. Chancellor Vex's voice carried new urgency. All civilian vessels begin immediate evacuation. Military vessels prepare for tactical withdrawal to secondary positions. This is not a defeat. This is strategic repositioning. Jake watched the tactical display as the beautiful alien ships began their strategic repositioning. The crystal ships accelerated to incredible speeds, putting distance between themselves and the approaching threat. The bioships followed, their living hulls already showing adaptations for long-range combat. Captain, Ben said quietly, we're the only ship that hasn't moved. Through the docking bay windows, they could see Nexus Prime's civilian population evacuating to emergency shelters deep inside the station. Alien families hurried through corridors carrying their most precious possessions. Emergency crews worked frantically to shut down non-essential systems. Lisa's voice came through the communication system again. Jake, Alliance Command is asking why we haven't begun evacuation procedures. Jake looked at his crew. Ben was young but steady, his hands ready at the communication controls. Mary had proven herself capable under pressure. The rest of his bridge crew, though small, was experienced and reliable. Lisa, tell Alliance Command that the Endurance is not evacuating. Jake, are you sure about this? Those ships out there are huge. Whatever weapons they have, they're probably more advanced than anything we've seen. Jake studied the Devourer fleet on his display. 37 ships, each one massive, each one moving with mechanical precision toward the station. Lisa, how long ago did the Alliance last fight these Devourers? There was a pause while Lisa consulted her data. According to the historical records, the last major Devourer incursion was over 3,000 years ago. The Alliance won, but at terrible cost. Entire fleets were destroyed. 3,000 years, Jake repeated. And they're still using the same tactics. Still running away and calling it strategy. He turned to Ben. Open a channel to Nexus Prime Control. Nexus Prime Control, this is Captain Morrison of the human vessel Endurance. We are not evacuating. Repeat, the Endurance will remain in position. The response came back immediately, filled with clicking sounds that the translator rendered as disbelief. Human vessel, you must evacuate immediately. Your ship cannot survive engagement with Devourer-class vessels. Control, we appreciate your concern, but humanity didn't come all this way just to run at the first sign of trouble. Jake could hear other voices on the command channel now. Alien commanders expressing shock and disbelief that the primitive human ship was staying behind. Admiral Knox's voice cut through the chatter. Captain Morrison, your bravery is noted, but foolishness will not serve the Alliance. Your metal ship and chemical weapons cannot damage Devourer hulls. Jake looked at his crew again. They were all watching him, waiting for his decision. Admiral, you might be surprised what an old ship can do when it has to. The tactical display showed the Devourer fleet entering weapons range. Energy readings spiked as the massive ships began charging their primary systems. Chancellor Vex's voice carried across all frequencies. All Alliance vessels, final evacuation order. Withdraw to minimum safe distance and prepare for siege operations. But as the gleaming alien fleets pulled back to their safe distances, one ship moved forward. The Endurance, with its scarred metal hull and chemical engines, began accelerating toward the approaching Devourers. Captain, Mary said softly, we're really doing this. Jake settled into his command chair. It was old and comfortable, worn smooth by years of use. Like everything else on his ship, it had been tested by time and proven reliable. Mary, take us forward. Ben, send a message to Commander Harper. What should I tell her, Captain? Jake watched the Devourer fleet growing larger on the display. 37 ships that had terrified the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Tell her it's time they learned what a 1,000-year-old ship can do. As the Endurance moved away from Nexus Prime toward the approaching Devourer fleet, something began to happen aboard the human ship. The changes were subtle at first, noticed only by the crew members who had served on her for years. The thick metal plating that covered the hull started to shift. What had appeared to be simple armor began revealing its true nature. Microscopic fibers within the metal realigned themselves, creating new patterns that enhanced both protection and sensor capability. The surface that had looked crude and primitive was actually a sophisticated adaptive system. Ben Carter noticed it first. "Captain, I'm reading power fluctuations throughout the ship, but all systems are showing green." "Actually, they're showing better than green?" Jake nodded calmly. "Begin deep system initialization, Ben. Authorization Morrison Alpha 7. Ben's fingers moved across his console, entering commands that had been locked away for years. As he worked, more changes began throughout the ship. The chemical engines that had seemed so outdated suddenly revealed additional components. Hidden fusion reactors came online, their power output dwarfing anything the Alliance had seen from the human ship. The engine bells reconfigured themselves, optimizing for combat maneuvers rather than simple transportation. Mary Collins watched her navigation displays transform. New readouts appeared, showing sensor capabilities that rivaled anything in the Alliance fleet. "Captain, where did all this come from? These systems weren't showing on any of our standard diagnostics." "They were there, Mary. They've always been there. We just don't usually need them." The Endurance's true age was beginning to show, not as weakness or decay, but as refinement and perfection. Every system had been tested not for years or decades, but for centuries. Components that failed had been replaced with better versions. Technologies that proved inadequate had been improved through countless iterations. Lisa Harper's voice came through the communication system from Nexus Prime. "Jake, what's happening to your ship? The Alliance sensors are reading energy signatures that weren't there before." "Lisa, remember when you asked how old the Endurance really is? You said older than I thought, much older. This ship has been fighting for 1,000 years. Lisa, she's seen things that most of these Alliance species can't even imagine. On Nexus Prime, alien commanders watched their displays with growing confusion. The human ship that had appeared so primitive was now showing energy readings that matched their most advanced vessels. The metal hull that had seemed crude was revealing itself to be made of materials they didn't recognize. Chancellor Vex's crystalline voice echoed across the command frequencies. "Human vessel, what are these energy signatures? Your ship appears to be undergoing some kind of transformation." Jake's response was calm and measured. "No transformation, Chancellor. We're just showing you what we really are." The Devourer fleet was close enough now that their individual ships could be seen clearly. Each vessel was a massive black rectangle, its surface absorbing light and sensor beams. They moved in perfect formation. No communication between them, no variation in their approach pattern. "Ben, scan those ships. Full spectrum analysis. Already running, Captain. And sir, I'm getting matches from our historical database." "How historical?" "These exact ships, sir. Hull configurations, energy signatures, weapon placements. They're identical to Devourer vessels we encountered 400 years ago." Jake smiled grimly. "Same ships, same tactics? They don't change because they never had to." Admiral Knox's biomechanical voice carried across the command channel, filled with disbelief. "Captain Morrison, are you claiming that humanity has fought these entities before?" "Not claiming, Admiral. Stating fact." The lead Devourer ship began charging its primary weapon. Energy readings spiked as power flowed to a massive cannon built into the ship's forward section. "Mary, evasive pattern Delta 7. Ben, target the lead ship's sensor array." "Captain, our weapons aren't charged yet. They don't need to be charged." "Ben, they never went offline." What the Alliance had mistaken for simple projectile weapons began revealing their true capabilities. Gun ports opened along the Endurance's hull, but instead of the crude chemical-powered weapons the aliens expected, sophisticated railgun systems emerged. Magnetic accelerators that could fire projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The human ship's primitive targeting systems locked onto the lead Devourer with precision that amazed the watching Alliance commanders. Every calculation was perfect, every prediction exact. "Fire," Jake ordered. The railgun projectile crossed the space between ships in microseconds. It struck the Devourer's sensor array with surgical precision, destroying the cluster of detection equipment without damaging any other systems. On the Alliance command channel, voices erupted in various forms of alien amazement. The translation systems worked overtime to convert expressions of shock and disbelief. Chancellor Vex's voice carried new respect. Impossible. Devourer armor cannot be penetrated by solid projectiles. It can if you know where to aim, Jake replied. Their armor is strongest against energy weapons. Has been for millions of years, but they never adapted it for kinetic impact. The Devourer fleet responded to the attack by spreading into a wider formation. Their movements were perfectly coordinated, as if controlled by a single intelligence. They're adapting, Mary observed. No, Jake corrected. They're following a program. Same pattern they used against the Altarian defense fleet 600 years ago. Ben looked up from his console. How do we know that, Captain? Because we were there, Ben. Not us personally, but this ship was there. She's been fighting these things longer than most species have existed. Jake stood and walked to the main display. The tactical situation was developing exactly as he had expected. The Devourers were moving into a classic encirclement pattern, trying to surround the single human ship. Lisa, are you monitoring this? Lisa's voice came through clearly. Every word, Jake. The Alliance command staff can't believe what they're seeing. Tell them this is just the beginning. Jake turned to his crew. All right, people. Time to show them what a ship learns in 1,000 years of combat. The Endurance began moving through a series of maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics for a ship of its apparent design. The heavy metal hull twisted and turned with impossible agility. The chemical engines provided thrust at angles that should have torn the ship apart. But this was what the ship had been built for. Not to look impressive, not to demonstrate advanced technology, but to survive and fight in the most dangerous situations imaginable. Target their communication arrays, Jake ordered. They coordinate through quantum entanglement transmitters located in the secondary hull sections. How do we know that? Ben asked, even as his hands worked the targeting controls. Experience. Ben, we've captured Devourer ships before. The railguns fired again, and another Devourer vessel lost its ability to coordinate with the fleet. Then another. The perfect formation began to break down as individual ships lost contact with the central intelligence. Admiral Knox's voice carried across the command channel. Captain Morrison, how long has humanity been fighting the Devourers? Jake's answer was simple and direct. Since before your species learned to make tools, Admiral. The Endurance isn't our newest ship. She's our oldest. And she's still here because she works. On Nexus Prime, alien commanders stared at their displays in growing amazement. The primitive human ship was systematically dismantling a Devourer fleet using tactics and technologies they had never seen before. Chancellor Vex's crystalline form flickered, with patterns of light that indicated deep thought. Captain Morrison, if your ship is truly 1,000 years old, what else might humanity have learned in that time? Jake looked at his crew, then at the tactical display showing the Devourer fleet beginning to fall back in confusion. Chancellor, you're about to find out. The battle that followed became legend among the species of the Grand Alliance. The Endurance moved through the Devourer fleet like a predator that had been hunting the same prey for centuries. Because that was exactly what it was. Jake Morrison's voice remained calm and steady as he coordinated the attack. Ben, target the power distribution nodes on Ship 7. Third segment from the rear, just above the main weapon housing. How do you know where their power nodes are? Ben asked as his fingers worked the targeting system. Same place they've always been. Devourers haven't changed their design in 3 million years. They don't need to evolve when they can just build bigger. The railgun fired and another massive Devourer ship went dark as its power systems failed. The vessel continued moving forward on momentum alone, but it was no longer a threat. On the Alliance command channel, voices filled with amazement continued their chatter. The alien commanders had stopped trying to understand what they were seeing and were simply watching in fascination. Mary, bring us around to attack Vector 43. We need to hit their command ship before it can call for reinforcements. Command ship? Mary asked as she worked the navigation controls. They all look the same to me. Ship 12, the one hanging back from the main formation. It's got additional communication arrays and a larger crew section. Same configuration the Devourers have used for command vessels since we first encountered them. Lisa Harper's voice came through from Nexus Prime. Jake, Alliance Intelligence is asking how we know so much about Devourer ship design. Tell them we've been taking These ships apart for study since before most of their civilizations existed. The Endurance swept past 3 de vos vaisseaux, its weapons firing with mechanical precision. Each shot found its target, disabling critical systems without destroying the ships entirely. Admiral Knox's biomechanical voice carried new respect. Captain Morrison, your tactical knowledge appears to be extensive. How many times has humanity fought these entities? How many times have you eaten breakfast, Admiral? After a while, you stopped counting. Jake studied the tactical display. The Devourer fleet was beginning to show signs of confusion. Their perfect coordination was breaking down as individual ships lost communication with their command structure. Ben, scan for their backup command protocols. They'll switch to a secondary command ship when the primary is disabled. Already scanning, Captain. Looks like Ship 21 is beginning to assume command functions. Take it out. The railgun spoke again, and another Devourer vessel went silent. The remaining ships began moving in less coordinated patterns, some attempting to retreat while others continued their attack. Chancellor Vex's crystal voice echoed across the command frequencies. Captain Morrison, the Devourer fleet is beginning to withdraw. This is unprecedented in Alliance records. It's not unprecedented, Chancellor. It's standard behavior when they lose command cohesion. They'll retreat to the edge of the system and wait for reinforcements. How long do we have? About 6 months if they follow their usual pattern. Plenty of time to prepare proper defenses. Jake turned to Mary. Plot an intercept course for the retreating vessels. We need to make sure they understand they're not welcome here. The Endurance changed course, pursuing the fleeing Devourer ships. The pursuit was methodical, almost routine. Each time a Devourer vessel tried to break away from the main group, the human ship was there to force it back into formation. Captain, Ben called out, I'm reading new contacts on long-range sensors. Looks like Alliance ships returning. Through the docking bay windows visible on the main screen, they could see the beautiful alien vessels that had retreated earlier beginning to return to the battle zone. The crystal ships of the Zephyrians sparkled in the starlight as they accelerated back toward Nexus Prime. The Vorthan bioships had grown new sensor pods to better observe what was happening, but they kept their distance, watching as the single human ship herded the entire Devourer fleet toward the edge of the system. Admiral Knox's voice carried a new tone. Captain Morrison, Vorthan tactical analysis suggests the Devourers will attempt to regroup at the system's edge. Do you require assistance? Jake smiled slightly. Negative, Admiral. We can handle it from here. The last Devourer ship crossed the boundary of the star system and disappeared into the darkness of deep space. The threat was over, at least for now. Jake settled back into his command chair and looked at his crew. They had performed flawlessly, but then again, they had been trained by the best teacher possible. Experience. Ben, send a message to Nexus Prime Control. Tell them the area is secure. Already sent, Captain. And sir, we're receiving communication requests from about 50 different Alliance species. Put Chancellor Vex through. First, the crystalline voice carried tones that the translator had difficulty rendering. Captain Morrison, the Alliance owes you a debt of gratitude. Your actions today have saved countless lives. Just doing our job, Chancellor. Captain, if I may ask, how long has humanity truly been fighting the Devourers? Jake was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Chancellor, this ship launched from Earth nearly 1,000 years ago. Her mission was to explore the galaxy and protect human colonies from threats they couldn't handle themselves. He paused, looking at the tactical display that still showed the retreating Devourer fleet. The Devourers were the first major threat we encountered. We've been fighting them ever since. Not constantly, but whenever they show up, we're usually there to meet them. Lisa Harper's voice joined the conversation from Nexus Prime. Jake, Alliance Command is asking about our other ships. How many vessels like the Endurance does humanity operate? Jake exchanged glances with his crew. Ben was smiling slightly. Mary looked proud but unsurprised. Lisa, the Endurance isn't unique. She's just the one that happened to be available for this diplomatic mission. The silence on the command channel was profound. Jake could imagine the alien commanders trying to process the implications of what he had just said. Chancellor Vex was the first to speak again. Captain Morrison, the Grand Alliance would be honored to offer humanity full membership with a seat on the High Council. We appreciate the offer, Chancellor. But we didn't come here to join your club. We came here to see if you were worth helping. Another silence, shorter this time. And your conclusion, Captain? Jake looked at the tactical display showing Nexus Prime and the dozens of advanced alien ships returning to their defensive positions around the station. You ran when the fighting started, Chancellor, but you came back when you thought it was safe. That shows good survival instincts and loyalty to your friends. He stood and walked to the main viewing window. The alien ships were resuming their normal operations around Nexus Prime, but he could see that many of them had changed their positioning to give the human ship a much wider berth. We'll accept Alliance membership, Chancellor, but understand something. When the next crisis comes, and there will be a next crisis, humanity won't be running away to safe distances. We understand, Captain Morrison, and we are grateful. As the Endurance began its return journey to Nexus Prime, Jake reflected on the events of the past few days. The aliens had laughed at humanity's old ship and primitive technology. They had offered to take humans under their protection like children who needed guidance. But when real danger had appeared, all their advanced technology and beautiful ships had retreated to safe distances while the primitive human vessel had moved forward to face the threat. Captain, Mary said softly, the docking master is assigning us a new berth. Bay 7, right next to the High Council chambers. About time they gave us some respect, Ben commented. Jake shook his head. It's not about respect, Ben, it's about understanding. They understand now that looking advanced and being effective are two different things. Lisa Harper appeared on the main screen via communication link from the station. Jake, I'm getting reports that other Alliance species are requesting meetings with humanity. They want to know more about our technology and our history with the Devourers. Set up the meetings, Lisa, but make sure they understand something first. What's that? Jake looked at his crew, then at the scarred, metal walls of his ship that had carried them safely through another battle. Make sure they understand that we didn't survive 1,000 years of fighting by having the newest technology or the prettiest ships. We survived by building things that work, keeping them working, and never giving up when things get difficult. He sat back down in his worn command chair and smiled. Same reaction every time. Lisa, they always laugh at the old ways until they see what the old ways can do. As the Endurance docked at Nexus Prime in its place of honor, the lesson was complete. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had learned that sometimes the most impressive-looking technology wasn't the most reliable. Sometimes the newest developments weren't the most effective, and sometimes the species that looked the most primitive had simply learned to perfect what worked instead of constantly chasing what was fashionable. The human ship that had been dismissed as a relic was actually proof that the best technology wasn't necessarily the newest technology. It was the technology that kept working when everything else failed. And in a dangerous galaxy full of ancient threats and unknown challenges, that was exactly the kind of technology